We've got courtroom drama, the justice system works, sort of, and Frank is gonna be pissed. What's going on, Marvelites? Today we are talking about episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again. And I gotta say, this was an excellent episode, even though we didn't get to see Daredevil at all. And I don't even care that we didn't. But of course, there are already people complaining that this episode was no good because we didn't get to see Matt as Daredevil. Now, I'm not the biggest reader of Daredevil comics, but the few that I have read have shown just complete issues of courtroom procedural stuff without even seeing Daredevil at all. And this was also corroborated by someone who has read all of the Daredevil issues, Polly from Comixed on Threads. Go ahead and check her out. But she had mentioned this last night in the Earth's Mightiest Nerds Discord server, which, if you want to be a part of that, check out the description below. All you have to do is sign up for the newsletter and you will get access to the Discord server. But the fact that we didn't get to see Matt as Daredevil in episode 3 is very true to the comics. And so this episode is basically the entire hearing for Hector Ayala, aka the White Tiger, who became a client of Matt's after we saw him accidentally kill a cop in episode 2. And this entire storyline, including this episode, is pretty much taken straight out of the Daredevil comics. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but first I want to talk about Kingpin and Vanessa. In episodes 1 and 2, we clearly saw Fisk and Vanessa having problems in their relationship. This obviously has to do with both of them wanting to be the boss, but clearly there can only be room for one. And their issues continue to be played up at the beginning of this episode, where we see them having breakfast together but at opposite ends of the table. They're also talking about a recent painting that was sold and bought as more of like business as opposed to something that they both loved and really connected on in the earlier seasons of Daredevil on Netflix. We even see them talking about how they want to do business a little bit differently, where we saw in episode 1, Vanessa wants to keep the peace between the families and the gangs, and that's mentioned again here in this episode, but Fisk almost wants them to fight against each other, where it almost seems like he wants a gang war to break out. I think Fisk wants a gang war to break out because with that, obviously crime will go up, and he wants to show that the vigilantes can't do anything to fix it, mainly because he's going to suppress them. That's going to leave only one person to clean up the mess, and that's going to be Fisk. And again, that kind of goes along with his campaign slogan of Fisk can fix it. Now, speaking of vigilantes, we did get a quick glance at Muse indirectly. We saw another mural that he had painted, which happened to be the Punisher logo with the word triggered on it. Which now leads us to the main meat and potatoes of this episode, which was the courtroom drama, with mainly focusing on Hector and Matt. At the beginning of the episode, we see Matt and Hector talking in Hector's cell, where we get to learn a little bit more about how Hector is feeling, including how lonely he is. We also get an ode to the character of the White Tiger. The White Tiger is Marvel's first Latin American hero and first superhero from Puerto Rico. And let's also give Camar de los Reyes his flowers for the work he did as Hector Ayala, because he absolutely crushed the role given the small amount of screen time and even dialogue that he had. And I think it's a shame that Camar passed away 2 years ago and he's not around to see the praise that people are giving him. Now that pretty much brings us into the courtroom for the majority of the rest of the episode. And I gotta say, I'm not a courtroom drama TV person, but this episode had me drawn in the entire time, just waiting to see what was going to happen next. And I think part of what really drew me in, besides the writing, is how the camera work was done. Almost all of the shots within the courtroom were handheld, and even some of it made us feel like we were actually in the courtroom ourselves. The next best thing about this episode was it was actually really great to see Matt be a lawyer. And I gotta say, Matt is clearly very good at being a lawyer. Although when he exposed Hector as the White Tiger, I was like, Matt, what is you doing, bro? What are you doing? And even though he was able to have a plan and use that to his advantage to show that Hector as the White Tiger has done a lot of good within the community and has helped a lot of people, I was still worried that Hector was going to be found guilty because I already knew and read about this storyline within the comics. Now, again, as I had mentioned, this is taken straight out of the Daredevil comics, particularly 3 issues, issues 38 through 40 by Brian Michael Bendis. And in those issues, White Tiger is basically framed for killing a cop after he goes into a pawn shop where some other kids actually were robbing it and ended up killing a cop, but it was posed and looked like White Tiger did it. So Matt and Foggy take on Hector as a client after Luke Cage and Iron Fist ask Matt to do so. Now, in those 3 issues, Hector ends up being found guilty and freaks out afterwards and steals a cop's gun in the courtroom and tries to escape, but ends up getting shot on the courthouse steps. So in this episode, when he was found not guilty, I was like, oh, they're deviating from the comics, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I still had this feeling that, of course, Hector was going to end up being killed at some point, because now he was in that courtroom with all those dirty cops. And we know that they're gonna have it out for him, given that he killed one of their friends. I just thought we were gonna end up having, you know, a few more episodes of Hector, maybe even seeing him in action as the White Tiger, but I wasn't expecting it to happen at the end of the episode, which I was like, ugh, Hector. Now, this doesn't mean that we're not going to see White Tiger again. Yes, Hector is not around and he has died. However, the White Tiger is a mantle, just like Captain America is in the comics, and it has been passed down to other people within Hector's family, including his niece, who he had mentioned in this episode. So it is very possible that we are going to see another White Tiger within this season, possibly series. And if at the very least they were at least setting it up so that there could be another White Tiger within the MCU at some point in the future. I think the bigger thing that we are going to potentially see in the future of this specific season and or series is that Matt brought up Hector's secret identity. I would be not surprised if we end up seeing Matt being on the stand where his secret identity is going to be questioned and or brought up in front of the public. Now, in the comics, there is this whole thing where it is brought up if vigilantes can be brought up into a court of law but maintain their secret identity as to protect their loved ones and family members, and I think that's going to be played in somehow within this series. A big potential Easter egg that was dropped was at some point in the courtroom they had mentioned Officer Morales, and a lot of people are suspecting that might be talking about Jefferson Morales, aka Miles Morales' dad. And some people are saying that that's not him because his name is Jefferson Davis, which was initially true. However, that has been changed because Jefferson Davis is the name of a Confederate president who obviously doesn't really align well with the character of Miles Morales' dad. So in the comics, that has been changed to being Jefferson Morales. However, Morales is not necessarily an uncommon name, so it could just be happenstance. Or again, it could just be the writers opening up that door to introduce Miles Morales and or his family within the MCU. And probably the next biggest and most glaring thing is we saw a lot of crooked cops within the courtroom. And in fact, we saw another person with a neck tattoo now of a Punisher tattoo. That particular officer could have been the person who probably killed Hector at the end, who was sporting the same outfit that the Punisher actually wears. Now, there's no way in hell that that was actually Frank who killed Hector at the end of the episode, and I think we're all in agreement with that. And the person who probably killed Hector was probably given a hit by Fisk, given that whole conversation he had with BB towards the end of the episode. Of course, Frank is going to be pissed, and I think he's going to go on a cop killing spree once he finds out that a lot of these crooked cops are sporting his logo. Overall, in classic Daredevil fashion, as we see Matt kind of winning and getting what he wants, we all know that that's going to come crashing back down. What did you think of this episode? Let me know down below in the comments. If you're still here watching this video, I truly appreciate it. Make sure you do that YouTube thing, hit the like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss another video, and until the next video, Excelsior.